Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or the guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's October 2nd, and we have a lot to talk about. But first, let me thank all of you who over the past week took the time to send an email or an instant message on social media congratulating me on the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. It means a lot to know that you're finding some value in the topics that we talk about, and I appreciate every one of you who have added RealTalk MS to your listening schedule. I was looking at some of the statistics for the podcast over the past year, and I discovered that every single week since our launch, so that's 53 straight weeks now, more people have listened to the RealTalk MS podcast than the week before. Our audience numbers have consistently grown week after week, and I'll say it again. Thank you for making the time in what I know are already busy lives to listen to the podcast, and to all of you who have reached out to me with your thoughts and suggestions about topics that you're interested in hearing about. Like I said last week, without you, I'd be sitting here talking to myself. So thank you. One more thing that I noticed when I looked at the metrics for the podcast was that a lot of people visit the RealTalk MS website to listen to each podcast episode. Well, I wanted to try to make that easier for you. So last week, I released the RealTalk MS app for your iPhone or Android smartphone or tablet. The app will not only have the latest episode of RealTalk MS queued up and ready for you to listen to, but it also lets me share all kinds of bonus content with you. Written content, videos, and I'm already working on a few things that I think you're going to find worthwhile. So I hope you go to the Apple App Store for the iOS version of the app, or the Google Play Store for the Android version of the app, because using the app is not only the easiest way, it's the best way for you to stay connected to the podcast. And I hope I mentioned that the app is free. You'll find those links to download the app in today's show notes. And speaking of staying connected to the podcast, next week, the European Committee for Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis is hosting the ECTRIMS 2018 Congress. It's the largest MS conference in the world. ECTRIMS 2018 is being held in Berlin, Germany, and next week I'll be at ECTRIMS in Berlin, and you can look forward to special episodes of RealTalk MS next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's October 10th, 11th, and 12th. You'll get the news, hear the interviews, and you'll be the first to get the research updates and announcements as they're being made at the largest MS conference in the world. And if you have the RealTalk MS app, you might even find some exclusive content from ECTRIMS that will only be available in the app. So next week, connect with the RealTalk MS podcast, and I'll do my best to connect you to ECTRIMS 2018. My guest on the podcast today is Victoria Reese. Victoria is an MS activist, an ambassador for the National MS Society, and she's the founder of the We Are Illmatic Campaign. Last January, I had an opportunity to talk with Victoria about the concept of inclusion in the MS community and how the We Are Illmatic campaign is out to literally change the face of MS. But before we revisit my conversation with Victoria Reese, there are a few other things that you should know about. Smoking is bad for your health. You'd think that by 2018 we would have already gotten that message, but an independent research review by the MS Society in the UK makes it abundantly clear that smoking may be bad for everyone's health, but it can be especially dangerous for people living with MS. The research review shows that smoking can make MS more active, worsen and speed up the accumulation of disability, and speed up the transition from relapsing to secondary progressive MS. Research shows an association between smoking and the number or size of brain lesions that appear in MRI scans. And one study in their review found that quitting smoking could delay the onset of secondary progressive MS by as much as 8 years. 8 years. That's almost 3,000 days that you could be enjoying a better quality of life. The Society's research also found a recent qualitative study that showed that 89% of the people living with MS in the UK didn't know anything about the risks of smoking as they relate to multiple sclerosis. But now, 100% of the people listening to this podcast do. So now, there's really no excuse. In fact, the MS Society in the UK is participating in the annual Stoptober campaign that runs in the UK throughout the month of October. If you have any questions about smoking and multiple sclerosis, you can email your questions to helpline@mssociety.org.uk, and I'll include a link to that email address in today's show notes. Living your best life with MS isn't 100% reliant on prescription medication. It also means making smart lifestyle choices. Smoking is bad for everyone, especially everyone with MS. And now you know. And while we're talking about news from the UK, a 10-year study there shows that 4 MS disease-modifying therapies, that's Avonex, Rebif, Betaferon, which is called Betaseron in the United States, and Copaxone, are cost-effective and they reduce disease progression in people living with relapsing remitting MS. The study also showed that the benefits of these disease-modifying therapies actually lessen over time, and the best patient outcomes tend to occur when patients begin treatment early and have less disability. So this study recruited about 5,000 MS patients and administered one of the 4 disease-modifying therapies between the years 2002 and 2005. And then this group was followed for 10 years to compare the long-term benefits of the treatment with a group of about 1,000 patients who hadn't been treated. And the results were that not only were the disease-modifying therapies shown to be cost-effective, which is a requirement in the UK's public health system, but the patient group that had received the disease-modifying therapies demonstrated a clinically significant reduction in disability progression and a meaningful delay before this group of patients required any sort of walking aid. And if you're wondering about that cost-effective part of the study, well, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence is the organization that approves drugs for use by the National Health Service in the UK. And one of the things they look at is the risk-reward benefit or cost effectiveness of a treatment over a 20-year time frame. Initially, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence concluded that they were not going to recommend any of the 4 disease-modifying therapies, despite evidence of fewer MS relapses over 2 to 3 years. Well, a deal was eventually struck so that the financial burden or the risk of these treatments was being shared between the National Health Service and the pharmaceutical companies that manufactured these drugs. This allowed the drugs to be made available through the National Health Service, and at the same time, this long-term study was undertaken. So the results are in. And the results underscore the benefit of treating relapsing remitting MS with Avonex, Rebif, Betaferon, and Copaxone, and the earlier treatment is started, the better. And if you'd like to review the details of the study, I'll have a link to the study in today's show notes. More than 1/3 of the American population, that's over 100 million people, live with some sort of neurological condition, including multiple sclerosis. But we don't have much in the way of reliable national statistics about any of the neurological conditions because there isn't a national collection system to gather this information. Now, back in 2016, Congress passed the 21st Century Cures Act, and this bill mandated the creation of a national neurological conditions surveillance system, which would allow the Centers for Disease Control to collect demographic data on neurological conditions. This data would inform and accelerate research by allowing researchers to better understand genetic and environmental disease risk factors, and this could be particularly beneficial to MS research. So Congress passed the law that created the system, but they never got around to funding it. So for the past 2 years, when the National MS Society has held its Day on the Hill in Washington, D.C., hundreds of MS activists would ask their congressional representatives in the House and Senate to approve the funding to make this National Neurological Conditions Surveillance System a reality that will allow the CDC to begin the process of collecting this important data. And these same requests were followed up on during visits to congressional district offices during congressional recesses, and then we'd be back in Washington, D.C. and asking again. Well, finally, Congress passed the spending bill that would fund the National Neurological Conditions Surveillance System, and this past week, that spending bill was signed into law. Now, if you're a regular listener, you know that I'm not shy about calling out our elected officials when they create policy that seems punishing to people affected by MS. But I am just as delighted to say thank you when they do the right thing. And last week, Congress did the right thing. Funding the National Neurological Conditions Surveillance System is going to help researchers who are trying to identify the genetic component to MS and to better understand how or why some people get MS and others don't. It's going to provide lots of reliable data, and that's going to enable lots of important research. This is a good thing. And it's been great to see the National MS Society and the Michael J. Fox Foundation lead the way in keeping this issue front and center in Congress. And this same spending bill also does some other good things, funding additional MS research programs through the Department of Defense and increasing the overall budget for the National Institutes of Health. You've heard me rant about the importance of advocating on your own behalf and the sense of empowerment you have as an MS activist. Well, you can multiply that feeling by 1,000 when you score a legislative win. So congratulations to all of the MS activists who had those conversations with our elected representatives, wrote the op-ed pieces and letters to the editor, and sent the emails reminding everyone that we're watching Congress and we vote. And thank you to the representatives and senators who saw the value in better understanding neurological conditions that we still don't know enough about. Thank you today for having our backs. Researchers at the University of California, San Francisco are recruiting African Americans living with MS in the United States to participate in a study. Genes are known to play a role in determining who is susceptible to developing multiple sclerosis, and genes may also influence the course of the disease. While identifying the exact location of MS genes in our DNA could help determine who's at risk for developing the disease and may provide clues to its cause, prevention, and even lead to better treatment. Focusing on ethnic groups with lower susceptibility to MS, such as African Americans, and then groups with higher susceptibility, such as individuals of Northern European descent, and searching for what's common and what's different in their genes may help pinpoint regions that contain MS genes and help researchers understand any difference that might exist. So this study will examine the DNA from blood samples taken from African Americans, looking for what's common and what's different between those genes and the genes from groups of people of Northern European descent who are statistically more likely to be diagnosed with MS. Now, it's not necessary to travel to San Francisco to participate in this study. Once you've completed the initial online intake form and you've agreed to participate, they will mail you links to 2 additional online forms, and you'll also receive a kit in the mail. The kit includes a consent form, a health information privacy form, and a medical records release form. The kit also includes everything necessary for a blood draw, which can be taken to your local Quest Diagnostics lab, where the blood can be drawn and then returned in a prepaid envelope to the UCSF MS Genetics Lab. and there's absolutely no cost for any of this to any study participants. Well, if you live in the United States and you're interested in participating in this study, you can start by completing a short intake survey, and if you have any questions, you can contact the research team by email at msdb@ucsf.edu, or you can even call them at area code 415-502-7202. And I'll include a link to that intake survey along with that email address and phone number in today's show notes. Doing MS research that focuses on members of minority communities can sometimes be challenging because cultural barriers born from long-time traditions keep members of some minority groups from coming forward and participating. And this doesn't only apply to research, it applies to treatment as well. There are groups where even talking about illness is not a comfortable or easy thing to do, which means we end up with people not doing as well as they could if they had started treatment for their MS at an earlier point in time. And that shouldn't be acceptable to anyone. Well, at the beginning of this year, I had a conversation with MS activist Victoria Reese, the founder of the We Are Illmatic Campaign. We Are Illmatic is a campaign that unites women of color who are living with MS, and its aim is to redefine the face of MS through greater inclusion. In a moment, we'll talk more about MS in the African American community with my guest, Victoria Reese. My guest today is Victoria Reese. Victoria is an MS ambassador on behalf of the National MS Society, and she's the founder of the We Are Illmatic campaign. Welcome to the podcast, Victoria. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I want to get into what the We Are Illmatic campaign is all about, but first, I know you were diagnosed with MS in 2012. Can you kind of take us through how you got to the point where you knew you needed to launch that campaign?
Okay. So unfortunately, I was diagnosed in September 2012. The journey has been short but long at the same time. Like, I got diagnosed, I really didn't know what multiple sclerosis was when I got diagnosed, and it really took me a long time to learn about it, search it. It took me a long time emotionally to be able to accept that that's what I had and the things that I would be dealing with or potentially dealing with the diagnosis. During that time that I was trying to learn and ease into the MS community, I started going to MS walks out here in Los Angeles. And I would go with my friends, and I really just didn't see that many people of color. I also, when I would research MS, I wouldn't see images of people of color. And sometimes, even on websites, they'll talk about MS, but then they'll break it down by race. And there wouldn't be much information or much studies on African Americans. So it just really, it bothered me that I knew that it had to be other people out there that were African American that had MS, but I wasn't seeing them. So I went to support groups, I've done things like that, and I just really saw a void there. So I was very transparent on social media about having MS. And when I did that, people started coming out of the woodworks, introducing me to, and I didn't say I've never met another Black person that has MS, but people just want me to meet their cousin who had MS, or their daughter, or their sister. So in that transparency on social media, I started to meet other people that were African American with MS, and they would say the exact same thing as me. You're the first Black girl I've seen with MS, or I've never met another person with MS, a Black person with MS. So I really saw the void. So that kind of led me to starting We Are Illmatic, because I understand that the MS Society and other organizations that support the MS community, they do the best that they can. But I think that it also takes people to meet them halfway. And perhaps people in the Black community don't reach out for resources like that. So I kind of wanted to bridge that gap. And here we are.
So let's talk about the first question when you look at the campaign is talk a little bit about how you came up with the name.
Okay. Well, so Illmatic is the debut album of legendary rapper Nas. It came out in 1994, and I always tell the story and with a smile on my face because it's just so silly but very fun to me. Though the term Illmatic is, from his definition, is supreme and ill, but ill in the good way. Ill is sick in the good way. That is a term in our culture that we use. I guess I would say in the hip hop and urban community that we use to say something is good. The outfit is sick. The outfit is ill. And all this time, I never, when I would hear the album Illmatic, when I would hear that name, I never thought ill as in sick. I never thought sick. And that shows you how easily we can separate words when we use it out of context. So I never use it that way. But one day, I think he posted about it, and I was like, wow, Illmatic. Like, I could really do something with that word because I'm Illmatic. I am Illmatic in the way that he means it, but I'm also ill and I'm sick, but I'm still very cool. I'm great. I'm great, and I'm strong, and I'm powerful. And I really thought this would be a great word to use as an empowering word for women that have MS, because we are sick, but we are still ill. In any way you want to put it, we are all of those things. And I just kind of wanted to take away some of the shame in being sick. I have a lot of women that have talked to me in confidence that have not told their parents, have not told their significant others, have not told their friends, have not talked to anyone about it, and they're just dealing with it alone. And a part of it is because of the shame that comes with it. They are not ready to deal with how people treat them after, or if someone like their significant other would want to still be with them. And I totally understand the fear in that. But this is a hard enough illness to deal with without adding shame to it. It's just horrible. And I just really wanted to be like a beacon of light for those people and to be a leader and say, hey, yes, we're sick, but you can still live a full, beautiful, happy life. There's people that have MS that didn't think they would have kids, but they have beautiful children, beautiful, healthy children. And I just don't want us in the MS community to feel so limited. And I think that happens a lot. So I hope this campaign helps. And it's been so great and so supportive to talk to women of color. And for me, myself, I wanted to meet women of color that were older. Like, what does it look like to be 40 or 60 with MS, and you've had it for a while? What does that look like? I wanted to potentially be able to see myself in them. And every day I get to be in a support group with women that look like me, that are dealing with the same things I'm dealing with. And I'm able to ask them questions on what they do. So it's great.
So the Illmatic campaign itself, it sounds like it's kind of a combination of something to raise awareness and also provide a virtual support system.
Obviously, we have different races that are affected by multiple sclerosis, but we have different faces to it. We all look different. Some people are mobile, some people are immobile, and some of us suffer from some symptoms, some of us don't. So there's just so many. We're a multifaceted community, and I think that even within the MS community, there could be some. I want to say some division. There, people who may be in a wheelchair may not all the way relate or feel that they can relate to someone who's not in a wheelchair, and vice versa. So at the end of the day, we all have the same illness, and I really wanted to just bring us all together because we are a community. We can help each other, we can educate each other, and we can use each other for support, which is so very needed. No one understands what having MS is like, besides people that have it. One may have a more severe case than the other, but we are each other's keepers. We understand each other, and it's just important for us to put different faces to it, so that when we are doing research, that a person like me comes up. A person like, my friend who may be in a wheelchair comes up, or my friend who has a cane comes up. My friend who is Hispanic comes up. I just think it's very important to be able to identify with people so that you can understand it. And maybe, like we mentioned earlier, maybe the African Americans that get diagnosed potentially wanted to or tried to be a little more active or involved in communities like that, but didn't see themselves on the website or didn't see themselves at a walk and felt like this isn't for me. This conversation, these tips aren't for me. So I'm just going to stay at home. I'm not going to be involved. And that could potentially be a problem. We won't know until we try. We won't know until we have some inclusion.
I had the opportunity to interview a researcher at USC who's actually doing a really interesting study that she's rolling out now, dealing with the impact of culture in the Hispanic American community in terms of people coming forward with their illness, whatever it might be. She happens to be an MS researcher, so she's looking at that. But what she's found is that when you go into some communities, there are actual cultural barriers that are keeping people simply because of the way they've been raised or the way they've observed other family members or friends act and behave, that you don't talk about it when you get sick. So this is kind of a big step that you're taking.
Culturally, I think that African Americans, we are not the most forefront about illnesses. We are not, confident or interested in going to an MS walk. Just culturally, we would pray about it. We would go to church. We would deal with our families and work with our doctors. But anything else, I think that's just not how we are as a culture. It's just, I do believe culturally it's like that. I'm not sure what it stems from.
I can't tell you how glad I am to hear that you're providing, first you're illustrating it, and you're certainly stepping forward with your own story, but you're also providing a mechanism for other people to kind of get it, to kind of see that there's another way to look at this and why sometimes getting support can really be helpful when you're dealing with a chronic illness. There's a lot of people listening to this, and I know some of them are thinking right now, how can I connect? So how can they connect to the Illmatic campaign?
Well, we have a website, is weareillmatic.com. There is a hub of information. You can read articles that we've been featured in. You can find our private Facebook group and request access. If you are a woman of color that has been diagnosed with MS, you can find out more information of how we started and the different content that we're creating and putting out on YouTube and on social media, which is just honestly just storytelling. We're allowing women to tell their story. We are giving tips and resources. We have a lot more coming. We even have merchandise that you can purchase to support it in your own city or wherever you feel like it. So that website is where you can find out more information. And myself, I'm on Instagram. My name is Picture This Vic, and I'm also that hub of information where you can get to anything.
I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us, Victoria Reese. You are Illmatic.
Thank you.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Don't forget to visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the Real Talk MS app to your smartphone or tablet. It's an easy way for you to connect to the podcast, and it's a great way for me to share all kinds of bonus content with you in the weeks and months to come. And don't forget, next week, we'll have special episodes of Real Talk MS coming to you from Berlin, Germany during ECTRIMS 2018. My name is John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.